saw in the introduction, Estelle has been with us before. So Sujatha was a newbie. I'm not going to say that Estelle has been around for ages because you are truly wonderful and fantastic. But Estelle, of course, has been speaking here at Responsible Raw Materials on a number of occasions in the past. Estelle, do you want to come off mute and then maybe give a bit of an introduction to yourself? And then I have some questions for you so we can have a little chat.
Sure, Sarah, thanks so much. And hi, everybody, and thanks so much for having me back. What a joy to follow those amazing talks. I've been taking loads of notes, and now I'm changing what I'm going to say to you today. I'm the CEO and founder of a social enterprise B Corporation called Levin Sources. We're driving the transition to just and sustainable minerals value chains by working with the actors all along those value chains and all around it. And I also hold a role on the G7's Gender Equality Advisory Council, and I'm a commissioner for the Global Investment Commission for Mining 2030, and have a couple of voluntary roles as well in relation to women in mining initiatives as well. So I do a variety of things, and as you can tell, justice is really important to me, and cooperation is just at the heart of what I do.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Estelle. So you've got plenty of time on your hands for doing various other bits and pieces. Now, in terms of cooperation, so as you just outlined there, it's very important in terms of a lot of the different areas that you're involved with. But you've also been putting together a cooperation pathway that I know that you want to share with us.
Yes, yes, I want to share it with you, and maybe I can tell you a little bit about where this idea came from and why it happened. Cooperation has always been there as part of my work, and I came to realize actually about a year or two ago that actually most of our services are in that space of helping business partners work better together to drive impact and to control risk. And it was a bit of an aha moment. And I think also because of our relationship as well, Sarah, because I know that Satala, in the work that I did with you, we were doing stuff at the operational level within a mining institution for um, their own operations. And my role was to help with ASM engagement, which is about that relationship. And it's the same in our value chain work and our investment work. So it's important to me for those reasons. We just live and breathe at 11 Sources. And I was working with Johannes Drilsma, who spoke, yes, 2 days ago. At the Global Battery Alliance, and he was developing and using this consensing method as part of helping us with our working groups. He was leading the greenhouse gas working group, I was leading the human rights working group, to try and build consensus amongst a very diverse set of stakeholders to create the pioneering indices for the GBA's battery passports. And I had this moment where I went, well, it's not enough to build consensus because well, if we want to cooperate, we have to build consensus first. But what does that look like as a process? And is there a deepening here? And I began to kind of map out this pathway. And so maybe, Joss, if you could just share the slide. And I feel a bit almost embarrassed to share this because it almost feels so obvious that maybe it's not necessary. But in a way, actually, Joss, do you have the actual slide rather than this? Because the slide kind of summarizes it, makes it easier for people to see, perhaps. Sorry to be a bossy woman.
No, no,
Um,
apologies. Just grab it
um,
quickly. Apologies for that.
yeah, it's kind of obvious, but I found that one side conceptualized it in this way and got it down on paper and then shared it with a number of collaborators who greatly improved it with me. Realized it was actually quite valuable. So decided to publish it on our website and put it out there as an open source tool for others to use and hopefully develop and improve upon. Already in our conversation today, I've had a few different ideas as to ways that we can deepen it, and I'll talk a bit about that now. So, you know, I've done a lot of work on collaborations over the years, and what you'll see if you click on the link, which I know Joss is going to share later to the first document she shared, I name some of the collaborations that we've had at Levin Sources that kind of map onto each of these, so, to give a sense of, it's okay to just be at one of these points. And it's okay to not necessarily go further because maybe just being at that particular level is all you need to achieve your mutual goals. But if you do want to go deeper, which means going further along to the right, then you kind of have to go through some of the first steps Because if you don't, the collaboration or cooperation is less likely to succeed. Now, that's an assumption rule I'm putting out there. I'd love it to be tested. I'd love people to prove me wrong and to make this even more valuable. But if I can just take you along the journey, the very first thing you need is champions. You need people that say, this is an issue. I think it was your point, Maeve. You said there's or maybe it wasn't. Sorry, it was Sarah described earlier a point somebody else made 2 days ago, that you've got to have the courage to step up and take the action once you see that there's a need. And so you need those champions to go, we need to do something about this. Who do I need to work with to make it happen? And so once they do that, they come together and they figure out what the motivation could be for the community that is going to work on this. And you start to do outreach and engagement with the other organizations or individuals that you recognize are necessary to really do the best to solve that issue. And through those bilateral engagements, you understand everybody's positions, interests, reasons, the business case, the impact case for participating. And you can start to design and build what the collaboration is going to look like. And it requires, so that kind of, there's a research component to this, there's outreach, there's a bit of advocacy and promoting the idea and getting that feedback until you eventually get to a point where those organizations that want to come and be part of this, at the very least, make a commitment to learn, as a first point to then eventually making a decision later as to whether or not they'll participate and how. So it takes you into the discovery phase. And in the discovery phase, you're kind of working together to get to common ground understanding. And it's exactly the point others were making about how do you do this when people come from different backgrounds with different ways of seeing, different levels of understanding. We just did the discovery piece yesterday with the Global Investor Commission for mining. We did some work for them on autism and small-scale mining. And the purpose of that presentation was to bring all of these commissioners from very different backgrounds to a more common point of understanding so that we can start to ideate as a commission on what could the commission do on ASM. If we had just asked that question before we'd done the discovery, we'd have found we were talking past each other. We might have been disagreeing. There was different levels of understanding. It would make the next part of the process less efficient. And then after discovery, you get to, once people have got to a point of learning where the evidence stacks up and they go, this is worth my time, I can commit to dedicating resources to this, you enter the consensus building process. And this is where you're bringing Johannes in or other facilitators who are going to start to really explore just through dialogue. What are we doing? And you start to co-design what you're going to do. And at the end of that, you get to this commitment to act. Now, it may just be like we do, Sarah. You get to cooperation at Levin Sources and Satala, where we love each other, we love what we're each doing. We think that we want to support each other's mutual missions. We want each other to thrive and carry on with our fabulous, initiatives, and we will help each other out, just like Maeve did. She'll grab these two people together and she'll say, you guys need to talk. Or we will say, hey, Sarah, there's this thing going on, you need to be part of it. Or you will come to me and go, I need an idea on this, Estelle, can you help me? And I'll go, yeah, let's spend half an hour, and we brainstorm together. So we cooperate to help each other go in and do our jobs better. And Levin Sources does that with a lot of different partners. It doesn't mean we're necessarily at that moment in time on a project together, but we've just aligned in terms of what we see the value each other brings into the world, and we're willing to help each other. And a lot of that is just about knowledge sharing and enablement. But if you decide to work together, but then you get to collaboration. I'm going to skip over coordination for a second because it's a little bit different. And collaboration is like the projects that we've done together actually on the ground for a client where we have to put a bigger design piece around it. But moving aside just to consulting firms, collaboration is things like the types of value chain collaborations that we get from the downstream, working in the upstream, for example, in DRC, trying to tackle issues around child labour or trying to drive a more just energy transition through creating the conditions for greater prosperity on the ground. That's a lot harder because that requires much bigger resource commitment, joint planning. You're really doing a thing together. And there's much more space for that to go wrong. And it requires a lot deeper project management skills and so on. And then you may, at a certain point, close the cooperation, or you may actually find the cooperation becomes its own thing, as you were talking about with responsible reserves. Or it may be that the cooperation is no longer fit to be with you, but somebody else says, we will take that over and move it move it forward. So this is kind of the pathway. It's not a neat pathway because coordination, I feel, is something that it's something we need to see a lot more of, particularly we see a lot of donor coordination efforts. If there's lots of money going to be thrown at a problem, if everybody's throwing their money at child labour in the DRC, where's the money going to come from for women's rights in Indonesia or for indigenous rights in Brazil or whatever? So we need to be coordinating and being strategic about when we have a mutual problem, who's going to do what. And so that kind of sits with cooperation in a way, but it's a bit of an extension of that. So that's the idea of the pathway. If you click the next thing, please, Joss, you'll see that as you go along the pathway, the intensity of communication deepens. You need greater trust to work at those different depths. And also risks escalate. That's why you need much more serious project management, coordination and trust building skills as you go along. And then the risks that sit there, if you press again, please, Joss, thank you for being my skivvy on this. There's a whole bunch of risks to navigate as you work through, and conflict of interest, competition, dealing with the boundaries of confidentiality and transparency. So that's what it is. And it's just there as a conceptual framework for people to make use of if it's helpful. Is it helpful?
I think it's incredibly helpful, Estelle. And so thinking about then using this,
Yeah.
I'm immediately applying this to kind of different projects, and then also as Sujatha was outlining, a lot of the kind of the academic collaborations, especially where you have academia and industry coming together, etc.
Yeah.
So I'm immediately thinking, what does this step look like? What does that step look like? From your perspective, do you have any hints and tips in terms of how people can really use it?
Yeah, I think what you've got to remember is it's actually, there's both soft and hard stuff that makes this succeed.
Yeah.
And some of the things I've been hearing from, the other panelists today is, mindsets. And really, it's okay to work with people that see the world differently. But if people come into this without a growth mindset, without a listening disposition, a sense of respect and humility, and a willingness to learn together and to accept and tolerate that there may just be some things that you can't bridge, but finding a way forward nonetheless, that is so crucial. So those soft skills are really important. At the same time, absolutely Maeve's point about the importance of the administrators and project management. I've worked in collaborations where there's just not somebody taking notes in the meeting, there's not somebody following up with agendas. So we're there with goodwill, wanting to try to collaborate, but the really simple administrative pieces aren't being done effectively, and it takes all the steam out of the collaboration. Also, sometimes you need contracts. It could just be a memorandum of understanding. It may actually be a fully legal contract. So you need to get the soft and the hard stuff right, and you have to be very intentional about that and try and keep it as simple as possible, because these things are already complicated enough. If you make them too complicated, then they're going to fail. And that you just have to be comfortable with a little bit of friction. Having been somebody that's been coordinating some of these deeper cooperations, there will be difficult moments, and people skills are absolutely fundamental to making this stuff succeed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that those grumbles, for example, or those sources of tension, in a way, if you have no grumbles or tension, something's going wrong.
Totally.
You're probably not pushing it enough.
So one of the first women who helped when I was first founded Levin Sources, a wonderful woman called Giza Rosen, who had been a client, worked with me for the first few years. She went on to become a facilitator, and we used to bring her back into Levin Sources meetings to facilitate our team meetings. And I remember one of the key things she taught me that I continue to use is she says, change happens at the interstices of different ways of seeing. Change happens when there's conflict and we work through it. So in a facilitated setting, you mustn't be afraid of that friction and those conflicts. You can manage them respectfully. You've got to be experts in taking people on a journey through it. And that's where Johannes's consensing methodology is really, really valuable, because, and having seen that in practice. And that's also why I feel the consensus building step here is super important. I want to also, just because Maeve made me think about it. And forgive me if it was Maeve or Sujata. You can tell, Sujata, you can see that my brain is not quite there because I've only eaten one mouthful of my banana this morning and had a bit of a long day yesterday myself and didn't get enough sleep. But you spoke about patience and the need to recognize that some of these changes are just going to take a lot of time. I have had a recent frustration with a sale where a client wanted to do a process that really needs to be deeply collaborative in order for it to be owned. As a Western company downstream, wanting to work upstream in a South American country with a community of stakeholders to which they know they're connected, but they're not directly connected, and wanting to build some form of supply chain cooperation. They loved our pitch because it was very cooperation led. It got the extent of meaningful stakeholder engagement you needed. But they ultimately went for something that was, I think, a quarter of the price. That there's no way going to deliver that. They're going to get a deliverable at the end, but they're not going to get that buy-in. So at the end of the journey, it's less likely to be as successful as with that upfront investment that we were planning. So I really do think you have to be realistic to match your resources to the objective. And the objective isn't just the destination of the thing you produce, it's the quality of the experience of the actors within it. And I think that's also the point about how does it feel for people who become subjects of somebody else's intended cooperation and are dragged into it, but not fully supported to bring that trust, to gift that trust, as you said, and participate. You have to have patience. And unfortunately, it means you need to put the right resources to cope with the fact that maybe these things won't come as quickly as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, if you're the person being asked to provide those resources or, that expertise, if there isn't the capacity to be able to resource it properly, actually being willing to say, well, we can't do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No,
Which
no,
is
we've done that in the past as well. You must, because it's also about your integrity and your values, because I don't want to be responsible for an extractive project that is dealing with people who are in vulnerable situations. I think there's an enormous responsibility if you're going to do that kind of collaboration to put them first and to be humble and respectful and listening and patient. It just sometimes doesn't work because, again, you're dealing with people that have different. That it may not be the social performance person you're working with that's wanting to do this. It may be the people behind them that they're struggling to convince because they come from a completely disciplinary background and with a different set of constraints.
Yeah, absolutely. Wise words as always. So, Estelle, thank you so much. Absolutely brilliant to see you. I know that there'll be lots of comments and chatter going on, more book suggestions as well
Yes.
happening there in the chat. Everyone, please put your hands together for the wonderful Estelle Levin-Nally. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Estelle. Great.